Well, welcome to Mandelbulb tutorial series number 3. My name is Patrick Cook, and I am about to embark upon a third tutorial series where we talk about large rendering from the Mandelbulb application. I've entitled this particular tutorial series Mandelbulb 3D Epic Rendering. Now, the objective of this tutorial series is to discuss and actually do a large high-resolution rendering from the Mandelbulb application. Now, the reason that this is important is because, well, number one is that we can get some really amazing graphics from the Mandelbulb 3D application. But reason number two for this tutorial series is because there is a limitation as to the size or the resolution of a still graphic that we can get from the Mandelbulb application unless we utilize certain tools that will allow us to be able to create a large, high-resolution graphic. Now, we're not talking animation here, all right? That animation was discussed in tutorial series number 1. This is the production of a high-resolution or a large still graphic. Now, you might ask why. All right, I mean, it's easy enough to make a still graphic in the Mandelbulb application. What isn't so easy is to make a still graphic that is high resolution. Now, when I say high resolution, I mean, if you take a look at the screen here, this is the default image when you first start the Mandelbulb application. All right, and then rendered out. This is what we get. This is the integer power. Okay, now I've set this to 1900 by, well, close enough to 1080. That would be considered high definition. All right, and I can render this. We'll go ahead and render that. Okay, so that was pretty good. That was easy enough. All right. But if I wanted a still that had enough resolution, that is pixels, all right, where I could send it to the printer, who would then print it, let's say at 300 dots per inch, all right, or DPI, dots per inch, 300, okay? And that's fairly typical for a physical print of an image, okay? Now, in order to get, well, let's get the whiteboard up here. All right, let's pull the whiteboard up and let's take a look at this. Let's look at some numbers here really briefly. Let me get my stylus over here. Now, let's say that I wanted a print, all right, that is 30 inches by 20 inches. That's a pretty big print, and that'll look pretty good up on the wall. All right. Now at 300 dots per inch, I would need 9,000 pixels, and here I would need 6,000 pixels. So back to the Mandelbulb application, all right? In order for me to get an image which is 9,000, let's put 9,000 in here by 6,000. Well, first of all, that's not a 6 by 9 anymore, okay? But let's just roll with that. Oh, let's turn off the aspect ratio here. Now let's put the 9,000 in here. Let's put the 6,000 in here. Now I can certainly render this. Let me check something here. Yeah, okay, good. All right, let's get back over in the calculation. Now let's go ahead and render this. Now, Now, what's happening here is that the Mandelbulb application is able to render that still at 9,000 by 6,000. So, technically speaking, I could take this image, save it off as a JPEG or a PNG, and then ship it over to a printer who would then deliver a print that would be 30 inches wide by 20 inches high. That's pretty good. That's not bad right then and there. Let me get this so we can see the whole thing here. Okay. So if I was to ship this out to a printer, that's about what I would get. Okay. Now that's pretty cool. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind concerning the Mandelbulb application. Number one, it is a 32-bit Windows application. Nowadays, 64-bit applications are routine. But the Mandelbulb is what are we talking here? 10, 13 years old, okay? The Mandelbulb application was actually designed and created in an era where 32-bit Windows applications were quite common, and that was perfectly fine. Nowadays, the Windows operating system will support a 32-bit application, fortunately, all right? However, a 32-bit application does have limits in terms of the memory that it can utilize from the Windows operating system, all right? Now, without getting into all the techies about memory, basically a 32-bit application is going to be limited on the amount of RAM that it can get a hold of. Now, that is going to limit not only the on-screen rendering, which is what we have right here, but it's also going to limit the size of the file that the application can put out, which is something like 4 gigabytes, okay? So being a 32-bit application, we already have a pretty significant limitation as to the size of the graphic that we can output. Now you see here that I was able to render on the main rendering 9,000 by 6,000. That would give me a pretty decent 30 by 20 image print if they print it at 300 dots per inch. Now, let's try this. Let's say, well, let's get back to our whiteboards, okay? All right, so let me get my stylus here. Now, let's say that for whatever crazy reason, I wanted a 60-inch, all right, print. And I wanted, I'll just double it, I'll say I want a 40-inch print. So that would mean I would have, what, 18,000 pixels at 300 dots per inch now. And I would need, let's see, 12,000 pixels in the height. All right, well, let's go back over to our Mandelbulb application. Get this out of our way. And let's see if we can plug in 18,000 by, what did I say, 12,000? 12,000. Well, let's see if that renders. Okay, so I'm going to punch that, and I'm out of memory. Okay. So what this does is it illustrates that the Mandelbulb application is just simply has a limit. There's a wall that we hit when we try to render beyond what the memory that the Mandelbulb application can grab a hold of in the Windows operating system. Mandelbulb is Windows only. Okay, there's no Mac iOS. There's no Linux, nothing like this. This is Windows only. So naturally, the Mandelbulb 3D application is going to be limited by A, what Windows will allocate to it, the Windows operating system will allocate to it, and B, by the fact that it's a 32-bit application. Now this example shows that there is that limit. Unfortunately, just because the application has a limit doesn't mean that I am willing to give up the fact that I want a 60-inch print by 40-inch for whatever reason. That's what I want. So the question we have, this is what we'll explore in this tutorial series, is how do we get high-resolution still graphics out of the Mandelbulb application? All right, so we're going to pick this up in session number 2 of our tutorial series number 3 in the next session. So I'll see you there.